Once you have all of your functions written, then you can go ahead and put it together. This script file that you need to write is essentially just calling all of your functions, giving you an idea about what parameters to use. So here is where you're going to prompt the user for a bunch of information. Use user validation, so you need to validate the user to make sure they entered in the right information. So there's only a certain number of notes that they can enter in, a certain number of materials, a certain number of cross sections, and a certain, there's no widths. So it says to use the error function. The error function works just like disp, where you just type in the message you want to print out. The only difference is that error is gonna stop your code. It's gonna print out your text in red to the screen and say, error, you did something wrong. Once again, keep in mind your units, you're prompting the user for the width in millimeters, where your tfork parameters function might want it in meters. So make sure you're paying attention to your units. And then you're gonna call your analytical solution and numerical solution functions for the first frequency and the first length. So that first fork in your vector. Calculate deflections. Here's your Tmax. And then you will call your animate deflection function in order to animate the deflection and see how they compare. That is what you have to do for your final script file. No one says that this is exactly what you're going to use in order to create your results. It just says you need to have a script file that does this so that we can run it and check your code. Another thing you're going to have to do is write your final report. So a final report is a written document. It's very important to practice writing. A lot of students overlook this, but it's very important to practice communication, to practice writing. It's a very key skill to have. So we are going to practice it in this class. So you're going to write an introduction and description of your code. Keep these pretty short. I gave you guys a template. Follow the instructions in the template. Read that red text, do it, and then delete the red text. Okay, so these should be pretty short. I do not want you to copy any code into this document. No code should be in this document. When you are describing your code, use bullets. Use pictures. If you want to create a flowchart, what I should say. Essentially, describe what you did. What is your code doing? Don't just write paragraphs. Paragraphs are so boring to read. I've gotten literally pages of paragraphs from students. Don't write that. Write as much as you need in order to describe your code without using excessive language. Bullets, really important. Flowcharts, really important as well. You've seen, I gave you some sense of what pseudocode looks like for homework 7. You do not need to copy and paste any equations in there. You can refer to the equations in the programming project document. Refer to, I used equation whatever to do this calculation. And then you are going to generate results. So you are going to call your tfork parameters function many times with all of these different parameters and insert the table. So this is going to be quite a bit of your results. I think when I wrote it, when I put my document together, let me see it. I have, nope, that's not what I wanted. Let me see. I have literally 3 pages of tables, and that's completely fine. But you're going to have a table for each of these. And then, given that information, you are going to make some observations. So make some observations. So you're starting to do some data analysis, make some connections. So observe how the frequency changes the forks, how the width changes the forks, how the material changes the forks, how the cross-section affects the forks. Specifically talking about the length, mass, and cost. Okay, so make sure when you are doing your observations, you're looking at things where you can really, there's only one change. So if we look at these first 3, the only thing that changes in these first 3 is the note. So you can start to infer, okay, what is the frequency? How does the frequency affect the fork? For the second two, maybe? For the second two, the only thing that changes is the width. For these three, the only thing that changes is the material. For these ones, the only thing that changes is your cross-sectional shape. So make sure when you're comparing your forks, you are choosing a set of data where only one thing is changing at a time. And then we tell you for a C note, 4.5 millimeter width fork, brass fork with a rectangular cross-section, you're going to create a bunch of static plots. So I encourage you to just write another script file that plots your data, t equals 1, 101, 201, 301, 401, and 501. So you're going to see how does your data change, or how is your fork changing at all of these different time points. It's not going to be that exciting because you're not fully seeing it go up. Like, you've got lots of time points. It's not just like slowly going up and slowly going down. But you're going to plot at your first time point, which is your first column, 101, 201, 301, 401, etc. And then write a few sentences comparing the two methods. So we're not asking for you to go into high detail about how these two methods are calculated, but make some observations. How do they differ on your plots? What do you see? It's just a few sentences. 2 sentences, 3 sentences, not that many. Write your conclusions. Your conclusions aren't necessarily about your programming itself. It's more about the whole project itself. So some reflection on how you approached your code, what were some best practices that you implemented. I really enjoy reading your conclusions. I really do. I like to see what you guys learned about a bigger project throughout this process. And then finish everything else. So make sure when you hand in your report, there's no red text. Fill in all the red text, or delete all the red text and replace it with your writing. When you submit, you are going to have 5 different M files and 1 PDF. Zip them all together. If you do not know how to zip files, Google it. How to zip a file. Watch a YouTube video. But make sure your files are all zipped together. Make sure it's a single PDF. These are all just like you do your homework. One final note, if you're ever curious about what you should spend your time on, or if you don't get something right, how it's going to affect your grade, there's this nice detailed rubric that we put together that outlines what all of the points are going to be allocated for. Your final report is 30 points, 30 out of 145. It's a decent number. It's not the end of the world, but make sure you prioritize if you're running out of time. I hate saying that, but play the game of school. But if you're ever wondering where all your points are going, where all your points are coming from, just go back to the rubric and see how it's going to affect. Last thing to mention, MATLAB Grader is set up for Part A, Part B, and Part C. For Part D and E, I don't have those set up. It doesn't make sense to set one up for plotting. And for your script file, you're just calling your script file. Okay, so MATLAB Grader is set up for the first 3 parts. You can check to see that your answers are correct and that they match. With that, good luck. And don't forget, project-focused office hours on Friday. Party! I'll see you guys there.